Welcome to Animal Behavior. This week, we are going over the development of behavior. Development of behavior or behavioral development is about the changes in behavior. Particularly, we are interested in the underlying mechanisms in expressing a behavior. The behavioral development or the development of behavior is framed in a popular culture as the nature-nurture controversy. It should be very familiar to everybody. It is the relative importance of individuals' innate qualities, what the nature versus personal experience, what the like a learning that is the nurture in determining or causing individual differences in physical or behavioral traits. Other terms used in this dichotomy is the innate versus learned, genetically determined, or environmentally determined, or it is expressed as the instincts versus learning. We are going to study this behavioral development, especially its underlying mechanism, using the examples of honeybee behavior. The honeybee society consists of the queen, workers, and drones. Both queen and workers are female bees, and the drones are male bees. There's only one king in the bee society. There's only one king, no one else. And the workers, they are numerous, about 20 to 200,000 that consist of most of the bees in the colony. And the drones, they are none, like in the winter, or sometimes there are some, especially they need to mate. There's opportunity to mate with the queens. The queens and the drones are fertile. They can mate. They can produce the offspring. But the workers, they are not usually fertile. They don't mate, and they cannot mate, but they may produce drones. The most important job for the queen is the egg production. This is probably what the only job they do. Only job they do. So they just the queens just produce eggs, about many eggs. The drones, probably the only job they do is the mating with the queen. And how about workers? Basically, they do all the jobs needed in the bee colonies. For example, they clean the comb cells, they feed larvae, they are nest mates. For example, like the queen or other worker bees and drones, and they process the food, like a pollen or the nectar, or they also need to go out out of the beehive and forage, collect the pollen and nectar. Okay, now we know that the workers, they have many jobs, dozens of jobs. And the interesting question is that who orders workers to do what? What are you supposed to do if you are workers? And who orders? And when to do these jobs? Interestingly, what they do is that they have a job, different job depending on their weight, on their age. So when they are just becoming an adult bee, it's called emerged, closed to adult bee. You just become the adult bee. What they do, you just clean the cells. Okay, you clean the cell. You start with cleaning the cells here. Then, if you getting to the maybe 5 days old, then you change your job to the feedings. You're feeding the larvae or feeding the nest meats, so that these feeding jobs is kicking at the age of maybe 4 to 5 here. Then about like 2 weeks old, you becoming 2 weeks old, you change your job to the processing the food, like the packing pollens or the nectars. their final job, and probably the most difficult task, and only the experienced bees do, it is the forage. All other jobs, right here, they are the jobs inside of the beehive. So they are called, it's the nurse phase. Tending other bees or the jobs inside of the colony, inside the beehive. But after the nurse phase, they change their job out of the beehive and becoming a forager. You go out of the hive and go to visit the flowers, collect the nectars and nectars and pollen, and bring back to the hive. So they change their jobs around 2 to 3 weeks old. So that's the last and most important job, becoming a forager. So that's called like a foraging phase. And so we know that they change their jobs according to their age. And what causes a worker to go through these different developmental stages? We know that although this is the animal behavior class, I'm pretty sure you have the basic understanding of the central dogma of molecular biology, which is the DNA. It replicates itself here, and the information from the DNA is transferred to the RNA, and that's called transcription, and the information from the RNA is copied to the proteins, translation phase. Then a phenotype may be expressed from this protein. In this case here, we are interested in the behavior as a phenotype. Using this framework, using the central dogma of molecular biology, let's try to understand these changes of behavior in honeybees. We know that they have the two different phases here. One is the nursing, that's the jobs inside of the beehive, and the foraging, that's out of the beehive. They change it from the nursing phase to the foraging phases. So we have changes of behavior. If you want to change your phenotype, you must have some different genetic information so that the molecular building blocks has to change to express changes in behavior. Let's see whether this works. Okay, it's quite complicated, but that's called the microarray technology. What this technology does is basically detect the activated messenger RNAs. So which messenger RNAs are activated depending on different stages of the bees. So if you are the young bees, young nurse bees, mostly these genes here are activated. Those that are indicated yellow, it means that they are turned on, they are active messenger RNAs. So if you are young nurses, these genes are activated. And if you are old foragers, you are experienced foragers, and these genes are not activated. And these genes are not activated, and those genes are now activated, indicated by yellow. So the active component of a worker bee's genotypes change depending on whether you are the nurse phase or the forager's phase. So now we know that this change of behavior, nursing and foraging, if there is a change of behavior, we also know that the changes in molecular building blocks, some different messenger RNAs are activated. But we know that the information from the molecular building blocks has to go through this stage, the protein stage. And what is this stage here? And that's the juvenile hormones here. So let's see what the juvenile hormone does on the changes in behavior. Okay, the juvenile hormone that is produced in the glands called corpora allata. The young nurse workers, they have low concentration of juvenile hormones. The juvenile hormone is low in young nurse workers, but the juvenile hormone is high in concentration in old foragers. So that the juvenile hormone might change the behaviors in worker bees. So the young nurse workers, they don't have much the juvenile hormone, but if you treat it, if you add the juvenile hormone, they become the foragers. And if you are workers, then you surgically get rid of the corpora allata. Then these glands produce juvenile hormone, so that these workers don't have the enough juvenile hormone. Then you delay transition to foraging. And workers, if you have the workers without corpora allata, but you add juvenile hormone, then they change their behavior to foraging. So we know that the juvenile hormone does the jobs, changing the behavior of the honeybees. And all these from here, they are basically genetically influenced. You know, that all the genetic information, the DNAs and messenger RNAs, and this information is transferred to the protein, and the information from the protein is transferred to the behavior. So all these are you might want to say that's the genetically based. But the honeybees, how do you know whether you should nurse or you should forage? Where do they get this information? What to do? Let's assume that here in the beehives, there's so many nurse bees and there's not many the foragers. So foragers bring out small food, but you have a lot of that nurse bees processing the food. Then there's an imbalance between these two. Or the other way around, there may be a small number of the nurse bees and a lot of foragers. Then you cannot really process all the foods the foragers bring in. How do you get this balance between these two phases? And what determines to change in the expression of these building blocks, juvenile hormone, and the changes in bees? The interesting thing in the bee behavior is that when the foragers go out, they collect the nectar from the flowers and they bring back to the beehive, and then what they do is that they regurgitate, basically like a throw up, regurgitate the nectar and pass it to this nurse bee, and then nurse bees store the nectar in the bee the honeycomb cells. When the foragers they return to the cell, they don't store the nectar directly into these cells. They transfer their stored nectar to the nurse. Then nurse they process it, then store in the combs. So there is like a social interaction between the foragers and the nurse bees. So you might want to make a hypothesis that the deficit in social encounters with the old foragers may have been stimulated an early developmental transition from nurse to forager behavior. And what this means is that if you have a lot of interactions between the nurse bees and social bees, then you might then the nurse bees do not become the foragers, but there's like a less interaction between the nurse bees and foragers. Then the nurse bees may become the forager. That's basically the idea behind this hypothesis. And let's test this hypothesis using the experiments. So what you have is that you have a colony basically made of the only young workers. Okay, here's a young workers. It's a colony made of only young workers, these two groups of colonies. Then in one group of colonies, you add the old foragers. And the other group of the colonies, you add like a young bees. That's the treatment. So different. One, you add the old foragers, and the other one, you add the like a young bees, and see the let's observe then the behaviors of the original residents. And here in this group here, the young workers, they stay nurse bees. So that's the number of the foragers. So these bees, the young workers, they just stay and they do not become the foragers. And these old foragers, they go out and they bring back, they forage all the nectars and pollens. But situation here is very different here. Two young bees, basically these two are the nurse phase bees, so that somebody has to go out and collect the nectars. And who does that? And these bees, because there's no the foragers. So these bees change their behavior to become foragers and go out and collect the nectars and bring back these nectars to the colony. So that the results of this experiment demonstrate the social interactions between the young bees, young nurse bees, and foragers are very important in transition to the foraging stage. Now we know that when the foragers they transfer nectar to the nurse bees, they transfer the nectar as well as the ethyl oleate. That's basically the fatty acid compound. And because this fatty acid compound change the behavior of the receiver, it's called also pheromone. It's called also the primer pheromone because it changed their behavior permanently. And if you when the foragers give the nectar as well as the ethyl oleate to the nurse, then the nurse they remain on nurse bees. But if there's not much foragers, there's no social interactions between these two, then there's less ethyl oleate, then these nurse bees may become the foragers. So what controls this boost of the juvenile hormone? So it causes the changes in behavior like between the nursing and foraging. That's the ethyl oleate. And also it's a minus because it's a negative feedback, negative control. If you have a lot of ethyl oleate given by the like a foragers, then the nurse bees stay nurse bees. But if you don't have much, if you don't have the ethyl oleate minus, then your nurse bees change your behavior to foraging. So we know that earlier that these phase is maybe genetically determined. Okay, it's just basically the genetic effects. But this ethyl oleate is coming from the interactions with the other bees, especially the foragers. So that's the signal from the environment. So to activate this whole genetic machinery, you have to have a signal that is from the environment, other foragers. So you have the genes here, the genes, and here's genes and environment interaction here. That's the interaction between these two. So if you like to have the changes in behavior, then you have both the signal from the environment and the genetics. These two are requires in behavioral development. So it's wrong to say that some behavioral phenotypes are more genetic than others because the genetic information in the DNA they make up the gene is expressed only when the gene is in a proper environment. Also, it is wrong to say that the given phenotype is environmentally determined. There is no such thing that the environmentally determined without any genetic machinery. If you want to express any any phenotype, behavioral phenotype, you have to have the genes and environment, the interactions. They are the genetic informations contained in large number of the genes, and they have to be expressed in a multitude of the gene-environment interactions. So behavioral development requires both the genes and environment. So this is the traditional view of behavioral development. If you like to have if you have some behavior expressed, then okay, the genes maybe influence some, and the environment influence some, and these two, the genes and environment, are separate. They have some independent effects to the expression of the behavior. That's the traditional view of the behavioral development. But it's impossible to rear an individual in complete isolation from the environment. And interactions between the environment of the organism and during the key stages of the development may have the effects on behavior. What does it mean is that, okay, these pupils are like an individual, okay, and it develops, and as it develops, they are not the same. Okay, let's just imagine a human, the human development. You are the 1-year-old, maybe like a 3-year-old, or maybe 10-year-old old child, and they are different at each age. They are they are not the same, depending on they are the same person when they are 1-year-old or 5-year-old or 10-year-old. They are all different. And also the environment they are surrounded, the environment that individual is surrounded by is also different. He's indicated by he's like a rectangle, trapezoid, and the hexagon here. And there's also the interaction between the organism and environment at each stage. So that's indicated by the bidirectional arrows. Also the interactions between the gene and environment, interaction between the gene, the organisms and environments. So that's called like interactive view of the behavioral development. The individual and its environments are different at different times during the developments, and you need both the genes and the environment interacted together to express the behavior. So development here, that's the interactive process. That's not the separate process between the genes and the environment. That's the interactive process between these two. And some of the genes can be turned on and off by the appropriate signals, and these signals is ultimately coming from the environment. And the development of any trait, okay, any trait, either behavioral, morphological, or physiological, it doesn't really matter. Any trait is the result of an interaction between the genotypes of developing organisms and its environment. And this week we have learned a very important concept of the development of behavior that may be useful throughout this semester. If you have a behavior that is expressed, you must have in a proper environment. Otherwise, the behavior may not properly expressed.